Les Paul was very, very inspiring to work with on every level because he was such a great musician. He used to show up at the gig 3 hours early to get the best sound on his guitar. He was all about sound. And he had such immaculate technique and touch. And he played, his attack was so beautiful, but it was so percussive. Les Paul is a mixture of sort of a down-home hillbilly style mixed with a very refined kind of jazz, exemplified by Charlie Christian, George Benson, and players like that. So he had these two elements going for him, sort of this Cracker Barrel, folksy thing mixed with very advanced technique and sophisticated arrangements.
And so what were you playing with him? Obviously you were playing...
Mixtures of standards. He liked Django Reinhardt. We played some of his tunes.
Because he was good friends with Reinhardt.
Very good friends with Reinhardt, and people don't realize that they were vastly different as players. But Les would put his own spin on tunes like Nuage, which is a Django tune. And he loved Django, but as an admiring colleague, he wasn't someone who played in that same style. Les was an electric guitarist, and but Les was a piano nut, and he hired me on the recommendation of another great guitarist, Bucky Pizzarelli, because Les wanted to bring piano back into his trio. And he had just been working with two guitarists and a bassist. And I think he felt like the sound was getting away from him in terms of, his original conception. It was a very dynamic trio he had. He had some great pianists with him. A guy who used to be with Tommy Dorsey named Milt Raskin, for example. And Paul Smith, who was later the accompanist for Ella Fitzgerald. And they were cooking, So he wanted to bring this back in, and I think he needed that to rev himself up a little bit because he had a lot of pain in his hands. His right hand was a bit gnarled from arthritis. But Showtime, he would overcome that and just come out and give the greatest show, no matter what pain he was in. With Les Paul, we were able to sort of recreate his original arrangement of it that he did with his wife, Mary Ford, but adding the piano. So it starts like kind of in a ballad tempo. So on the gig, we used to do this thing where I would play the melody down here. It's sort of a hotel orchestra style mixed with country, maybe. Like a little bit Floyd Kramer, but a little bit Carmen Cavallero. And Les played these very tasty country licks to answer me. So it'd be like, the song How High the Moon. But we would take it at this slow tempo, So this is me, and Les would answer like this. Then we come together. These are all Les's ideas, too, that I would flesh out harmonically. He used to put that chord in a lot. He loved that chord. It was a sharp 9. He would put it in an unusual place, and I've been doing that ever since I've worked with him because here's this sort of half-country guitar player doing all this cool harmonic stuff. It just blew my mind.
Well, I mean, who would you say you learned the most from of all the truly great figures of jazz you've worked with? Who would you say you learned the most from?
Well, a bit from each, Lionel Hampton, Mel Torme, and Les Paul. I would say I learned equally from. You know, I can't ascribe more importance to one of those experiences than the other. And it's impossible for me to categorize one as more influential than the other, because they were all three of those. I mean, those were probably the long-term gigs I had with the biggest names. I've done single gigs or a few gigs with big names, but those were gigs where I was a part of their band. And I would say the influence was impactful and lasting, but equal.
Would be your favorite jazz artist when you're playing, whether it's in London or New York?
Well, in terms of composers, probably Duke Ellington, George Gershwin, Richard Rodgers. Some of the jazz composers, Charlie Parker, Lester Young. So many great standards and jazz classics written by those people. Well, the Great American Songbook is incredible from every perspective, and it's something that's part of the American lore of world of arts, show business, and Broadway stage, movies. Transcends every modern era of America, and it ranges so broadly in terms of time, going back to the operettas of Victor Herbert, and then to the early pieces of Irving Berlin, who wrote his own lyrics and music, followed by guys like Cole Porter and Gershwin. Gershwin burst on the scene, writing a combination of classical and jazz. Then you had hybrids like Duke Ellington, who wrote standards and also jazz. And then the introduction of the great songs from the musicals made by Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, showcasing songs by Porter and Berlin and Gershwin. And then in the 40s, new fields of endeavor, innovative musicals like Oklahoma. And then beyond that, Leonard Bernstein, On the Town, West Side Story. The 50s, new styles of songwriting happening, but all fitting into this classic American songbook style. And then right up to Kander and Ebb, Sondheim, all this innovative stuff. Perhaps what you have now is a little more stylized, contemporary Broadway. It might, to some people, it sounds more like Canadian folk rock than Great American Songbook, with that style of singing, scooping up on the notes and all that. But if you went from Victor Herbert to Stephen Sondheim, that's about 100 years of music. And how could Americans not be proud of that, or feel they were part of it? It's such a pervasive part of American culture.
Ultimately, the song's the thing, isn't it?
The song's the thing, and it can manifest in a person's imagination and heart and mind in different ways. It can evoke a memory or an emotion, place. Our song. That's our song. We've got so many of them. It's amazing. And this is all aside from jazz and rock and roll. It's its own thing. It's written for the Broadway stage and films. It's quite remarkable. In a typical set of a gig where I'm the headliner, I might start off with something like a blues piece. Then a pretty ballad, something like there's Les Paul's chord again. Then I might play sort of maybe a jazz standard. Whatever. I'm in the mood to play. Maybe a Billy Strayhorn piece. Lush Life. Maybe I'll jazz up a rock and roll piece like how about that's Frankenstein by Edgar Winter. Or what have you. Something fast maybe.